Okay, good morning. Let's go ahead and get started with today's town hall. I'm Jennifer Fitzgerald. I have the privilege of being the mayor of the city of Fullerton this year, and today I'm joined by our city manager, Ken Domer. And the topic of today's town hall is to provide an update on city finances as a follow-up to the council study session that we had last week. A lot of cities uh, all over the nation during COVID specifically are talking about city finances and the challenges, the new challenges they're facing. And the city of Fullerton is certainly facing new budget challenges, but we had challenges before COVID that we had that have been going on for quite some time, and we'll get into that. And of course, COVID has made it worse in the short term, but we want to talk with you and make sure that you have the facts about the long-term challenges that this city faces and the things that your city councils have done to try to mitigate those challenges. Before we get into that, I do want to let everyone know a few COVID-related things. In the city of Fullerton, we're still accepting rental assistance applications. The COVID-19 rental assistance program provides a one-time emergency rental assistance to Fullerton residents facing financial hardship due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Eligible households can receive a one-time grant of up to $1,000. For more information, please call 714-738 6544. And to apply, you can visit our website at cityoffullerton.com/rental assistance. And I'll ask our staff to go ahead and put that up in the Facebook Live comment section for us. And while I'm at that, I would ask staff to give me a little support here to, let's see, make sure I am in the room, and I am. I actually don't need staff support. Look at that. Except actually, Tony, if you or Eric could come in, there's a technical my distance with. Okay, let me also say that while Orange County is in the red tier, I need you to turn it down, please. I don't know where that volume is. While Orange County is still in the red tier, we have moved in with all our indicators to the orange tier, and we need to stay in that tier for the next couple weeks in order to officially move to that orange tier. So please know that Orange County, all of us can play our part in making sure that we don't have an increase in the number of positive COVID cases. I encourage you to wear your mask when you're out in public. I want to thank the Center for Healthy Neighborhoods in Fullerton for giving me my newest mask. We have, as mayors, also a Mask Up campaign. This is my Mask Up campaign mask. And you'll be seeing some videos and social media from all the mayors in Orange County who have gotten together to stress the importance of keeping each other safe. Also, wash your hands regularly, use sanitizer. If you're sick, please stay home. And of course, you need to decide what risk you are willing to take. If you have underlying health concerns, I encourage you to be careful and be safe. And when in doubt, stay home. Let's also remind everyone that the registration to vote deadline is coming up on October 19th. So the election this year is Tuesday, November 3rd. And if you want to register to vote, you need to register by October 19th. You can check your registration status by going to this website, voterstatus.sos.ca.gov. Again, I'll ask staff to go ahead and put that in the comment section as well. And in Fullerton, you will be able to elect representatives to Fullerton districts 1, 2, and 4. You will be able to elect representatives to the city council here in Fullerton from those 3 districts. And the city also has 2 ballot measures for voter consideration. Measure S, the City of Fullerton Community Services Street Repair and Emergency Response Measure, and Measure U, the City of Fullerton Safe and Sane Firework Ban. So with that said, let's go ahead and get into really the most important issue that this faces long term, and that is our financial situation. As I said earlier, COVID-19 has had a significant impact on Fullerton's programming and services. Things like the temporary banning of large public gatherings like concerts and sporting events, indoor classes, including fitness, art, our teen programs and after school programs, and much more, has forced the City of Fullerton to close our facilities, cancel our events and our programs. But even before COVID-19, the city's financial position, although we've had a balanced budget each year, has continued to weaken through the decades. In the last 10 years, the city has eliminated 233 city positions, city employment positions. We keep up to a 17% vacancy rate on even the positions that are budgeted. We have outsourced as many local operations as is possible, and that is our street sweeping and our jail services so that we can keep our budget balanced. We've also required our employees across the board, every employment unit, to bring concessions to the table, and they have taken pay cuts. Most recently, our executive team has taken a 10% pay reduction. We've had to reduce salaries by 5% for all employees. We've laid off 153 part-time positions and new layoffs of 7 full-time positions. We've asked our employees over the years to pay more for their pensions, as well as their health care, to reduce the costs. And we've had to reduce professional services, contracts, training, and finally to travel budgets. Most of those have been completely eliminated during COVID, but they had been reduced before. And even with all of those cuts, the revenue levels are inadequate to sustain services Fullerton residents expect. So I want to bring the city manager into this discussion, and maybe you could walk residents through how the city prioritizes its spending.
Thank you, Mayor, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit further about this very important issue. And for those who are watching this either live or as a taped, I would encourage you to go to our website, because the information that was presented to the council at the last meeting on the financial update is on there, both the presentation and then a narrative that gives some more information. The prioritization of resources really comes through the budget process that we go forward with. A city has to have a budget. In the past, up until the last 3 years, about 3 years ago, the city used to have a 2-year budgeting process where we would set the budget every 2 years and then update it that second year. Because of our declining financial situation, it was determined that it's best to just go back to an annual budget presentation. And so what happens is around November, so in a couple months, city staff start looking at different costs and putting all information in. Around January, we start talking to our department heads about what are some of the changes they're seeing in their departments, what are some of the needs they have, what are some of the different program issues. And then that kind of wraps up to the point in May or June where we have budget study sessions with the council that sets priorities. What we've introduced in the last couple of years and what we seek to expand is what's called a strategic planning process. And really what a strategic planning process does is it looks at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, gets community input, different processes, brings it all together so there can be a sit-down meeting with the council. And again, what a lot of folks don't understand is I get direction and the council can only give direction in an open meeting. So it's not like we can get this in a closed door session or anything like that. Everything we do has to be in the public, in a meeting with more than 3 members present, because that's how policy direction is given. So really, that's how we start the prioritization. But it really comes down to the resources. You talk about us being balanced, and we have been, because that's our obligation to present and to adopt a balanced budget. But we've been doing that through holding back employee positions, that vacancy factor, reducing different things, outsourcing some services, creating more efficiencies in departments through looking at how that department works, make sure they're employing best practices. But the reality is that it's harder to prioritize if you have no money, because you can't say, oh, let's do this road or this issue over this. So the prioritization at that point becomes, what services do we cut back on a little bit? And just for example, about 3 years ago, the city council gave direction. We were paying through the general fund a subsidy about 1.2 million for animal control. So animal control is everything from, vicious dogs, stray dogs, but, animal licensing and everything like that. So we were in effect subsidizing some part of animal ownership. And the city council at the time said, well, let's make sure we get the actual costs of pet licensing. So over 3 years, we ramped up those costs. It's looking at items like that that helps prioritize everything.
What are the most expensive things that we do?
Oh, most certainly police and fire, public protection. And really, those are the core element of what a city does. People get on us or, ask questions about homelessness. We don't get any funding for homelessness, but we are obligated nowadays to address homelessness. But public protection, police and fire are our 2 most expensive costs. And then as a single item, it would be the streets that need to be prioritized.
And there has been a movement to, quote, defund the police. Why don't you talk about this city's philosophy with regards to our public safety? And we do have a question in the chat box asking us why we don't just outsource our police to save money. So perhaps you can talk about the cost of public safety and the laws around that.
I'm glad we have 8 hours to talk about that. It is a serious subject and a huge subject. I'll try to summarize. The costs are large in part because, a city service is primarily done through personnel. So both police and firefighters are expensive as individual units, let's call it that. There's extensive training, there's extensive recruitment. What some folks don't know is that for every 100 recruits that begin the process, if we get 5 that actually become police officers and stay with us for more than 2 or 3 years, that's good. The psychological background checks, a lot of other background checks, things like that. And what we've unfortunately learned here in Fullerton is that you want to make sure that, good coming in is good staying in. And in the past with like Kelly Thomas, that incident and stuff, what we learned is we need to make sure that we are attracting and retaining the best police officers that we have. And we are doing that now. We're doing a phenomenal job of that now. So it's been very helpful on that. So the costs are big.
Well, I think it's important to note that one police officer costs a total with all benefits and specialty pays about $250,000 for one officer. And I think it's also important for people to understand that we, because of our budget shortfalls, have made every department, including our police department, make significant cuts to their budget. We estimate we should have 165 sworn officers. Right now, we have about 105. And I believe that that is fewer patrol officers on the street now than we had in the late 1980s. And
Yeah.
our population has grown significantly since then. Is that all accurate?
Yeah, so we should be at that higher level of budgeted positions. Right now in our budget, we have 140 sworn, which is your officers, your chief, your captains, but fully on the street because of those 140 budgeted positions, we are at about 120 to 122 that are filled. And then those that actually are street ready. So we do have injuries, we have other issues that keep officers off the street. So we are down at that 105, 107 level, which is severely small. So we haven't
Good.
been.
Thanks for filling in those details. I thought I had my numbers about right, but you always.
Yeah, it is about right. Yeah, so we haven't been actively defunding the police, but we've been, unfortunately, in our situation doing that. And our current police chief, Bob Dunn, is awesome. He's been working with the group, and our officers are awesome to look at how we do things in a different way. Community liaison officers, and how we, take some of the duties that a police officer may be doing, the after effect of a ticket or writing up a accident report, getting that to a police services officer versus the police officer. You want your police officers actively out there looking and addressing the crime issue. And our officers do a great job on that. There's so many times where they, see something based on their training, and what results out of it is an arrest of a violent or hardened criminal off the street. And so those are some of the facts that a lot of times people don't see in here.
So thanks for that. Let's talk a little bit about Fullerton history. I was in your office the other day and I saw Fullerton budgets back from the 1970s. So I know you've been doing a lot of research. There you go. So talk to everyone a little bit about the genesis specifically of our lack of funding for our roads.
So in a simple term, I always describe Fullerton as, back in the 1980s, you could buy a car that had the roll down windows and air conditioning actually was an option. And so we are a city in our basic revenues that has the roll down windows, no air conditioning, and an AM FM radio without the cassette tape.
So it's a nice classic.
Yeah, we're a classic city. We're an older city. So, founded in 1887, incorporated in 1904. And when you look at the fiscal health of cities, their unfunded liabilities from pensions, it's those full service cities like Fullerton who provide police and fire, who have been around for more than 100 years. We have more problems. We have less fiscal health. We have worse streets. We're less contracted.
Our water pipes are old. Our sewer pipes are old. Our roads were built for horse and buggy.
Absolutely.
So we're constantly trying to catch up.
Yeah, absolutely. You look at, let's use Euclid for an example, which is a major arterial highway, and it's horrible, and it's 2 lanes in both ways. So it should be a 4-lane based on the average traffic count. But the problem is that all the housing was up against it for decades. We're not Irvine where we were able to be pre-planned. So those are a lot of the issues that impact us. But going back to how we got to where we're at, before 1978 and Prop 13, the city was able to actually set its own property tax rate. So we would set an expenditure budget. We would then set a millage rate, or the property tax rate, and collect the funding. We had sales tax, and we had charges for services. Post Prop 13, the state took all the property tax to themselves, and from that original, now that it's capped at 1%, we only get 15%, 15.64 of the property tax rate. So when you look at 2 different homes,
that means that all of the thousands of dollars I pay in my property tax, only 15 cents of every dollar I pay actually stays here in Fullerton?
Correct. 70% goes to support education. So, and then there's a little bit that goes to support the county general fund, that goes to parks, the Orange County Parks and Rec, not ours. But yeah, we get 15 cents on the dollar of your property tax. So, and that's really when it comes down to it is, so our revenue sources, primary property tax, sales tax, which we have a lesser amount. And on that, we developed as a bedroom community. We don't have a lot of commerce. We don't have a regional mall. We don't have a lot of auto malls. Those are the things that generate larger sales tax. And then nowadays, when people point and click to buy something, it actually hurts us even more, because if you would go down to the store, if you go down to Ace Hardware here on Commonwealth and buy something, we get the full 1% of the sales tax of the current 7.75 comes to us. If you
so less than a penny.
Yeah. So if you point and click and have that shipped to you, that sales tax now that would have come directly to us goes into the county pool. And of that, we only get 3 cents of that dollar. So, say 3 cents of that 1 cent. It's
we only get 3 cents of the 1 cent.
Well, we would get, if you buy it at Ace, we would get 100% of the 1%.
Of the 1%.
Yeah. If you buy online, we get 3% of the 1%.
Okay.
So, I know, math. It's a significant drop. So basically what happens is when a resident here in Fullerton shops online, Brea gets more of that sales tax than what we get.
Well, it is one reason why it's not the topic of this discussion, but it's one reason that since 2016, I've been fighting relentlessly and pretty much up against deaf ears that the sales tax formula has to be changed for online sales because our city really is disadvantaged, and many cities like us across the state. So let's talk a little bit about roads. Tell me on average, and I realize this is difficult because slurry sealing is pretty inexpensive, but major road reconstruction is very expensive. Give me on average to reconstruct a road, how much does a mile cost?
So just from history in the last 2 years, and I'm going to use, let's see, Commonwealth Avenue, which is coming up, about $3 million a mile to reconstruct a road. So, and again, by reconstructing, there's different things you can do based on the condition. A slurry seal is kind of that, you're waterproofing, because water, when you have cracks in a road, the water is a street's worst enemy. So you want to seal it up, crack seal, slurry, keep the water out. It provides more life. That's about 25 cents per square foot. When you now have to, do you scrape off the top 1.5, 2 inches, and that's called an overlay. That's about $5 to $7 a square foot. So considerable increase. But then when you actually have a failure and you have to reconstruct, when you actually go down 4 inches of asphalt and then have to rebuild the base, that's where it's $10 and above, and that's where it gets to be about $3 million a mile.
Okay, it's just an enormous amount. Let's talk about how we go about funding road repair and reconstruction right now.
So currently we do not use any general fund because we don't have the additional general fund to put in it. We use
Why don't we, Ken? Why don't we, Ken? What happened to our general fund that we don't have money for roads in it? It's a question I get a lot. I'm sure you do too.
Yeah. So there's when we talk about general fund, we're talking about one portion of the city budget. So right now our general fund budget is about $100 million. Total city budget is about $240 million. So when people say, well, police and fire get 70% of the city funding, well, they get 70% or so of the general fund, but of the total, it's a lot less. But the general fund is a discretionary funding source. And the reason being is that over the years, expenses have increased, revenues have not kept up, those revenues that go into the general fund. There are some issues. So like a lot of cities depend on the road tax, gas tax. We know we now have SB1 gas tax, but all that together, the regular gas tax, SB1 gas tax, and then what's called a turnback fund from the half-cent sales tax that OCTA used for general transportation, we get about 5 million a year, 4.5 to 5 million a year. One of the reasons that SB1 was put in place is that gas tax had not increased in over 20 years. Fuel mileage has gotten a lot better for cars. And now we have electric vehicles, which they're not buying gas. And hybrid, I drive a hybrid and I love it. I get 42 miles. Yeah, I get 42 miles per gallon. And I'm paying less in gas tax than what my old 21 mile per gallon car. So
well, and I just saw an executive order from the governor yesterday, an executive order to CARB that by 2035 there shall be no more gas powered vehicles on our roads.
Yes, well, they will not sell any new. You can still operate a gas powered vehicle, but let me tell you, by that time gas tax will dwindle and SB1 to near nothing. Right. And so the more, that's new information that now we've got to plug in and look at. We're going to lose of the current 5 million a year. We're going to lose 4 million based on that decision when it comes down to it. And that's the
and so it's not all, and it's not all doom and gloom. I mean, in this city, we have repaired and reconstructed over the last, since about 2012, more miles than we were in the previous 10 years. And so talk about how we've done that, how we've been creative to find new funding for roads.
So the primary thing what we try to do is make sure that we are consolidating all our projects. We talked a little bit earlier about old pipes, water pipes, sewer pipes, and all that. So we have a water fund, we have a sewer fund, we have a road fund. So what we first attempt to do is identify where all three of those funding issues can do the best bang for the buck. And that's really how we get more road mileage done, is we do all those projects at once. We identify a street, we replace the sewer, we replace any mainline water line. We have about 120 a year that bust. And then we redo the street. We can tap into all those funds to be more efficient with money. That's the primary way of how we've gotten more mileage out of just the 5 million, 4.5, 5 million a year that we get in gas tax funding. The other thing we've done, the city council has prioritized that anytime we do have a property sale or any other discretionary income, we put that money into roads. The other thing that council...
Let's explain, because I'm getting a lot of emails about city properties right now. So the city council recently voted to add 4 more city-owned properties throughout our city on what is called the surplus property list. And basically that's the first step in the process for the city to sell those properties. And so what the city manager just said is that selling what we consider surplus city property, vacant, underutilized properties that are assets for the city, for the taxpayers, selling those properties enables us to put more money into infrastructure. And that's been a priority of the city council. With the sale of the Meridian Health Club property in East Fullerton, we've been able to reconstruct both residential and arterial streets through that effort alone.
Yes, and also through some innovative things, the sale of Rule 28 credits to the city of Laguna Beach. Those
I have no idea what that is.
Yeah. Well, Rule 28 is it's a PUC, Public Utilities Commission, that provides, Edison has to provide some funding for undergrounding of electrical lines along arterial roads and all that stuff. We looked at the credits because it's not actual cash. The credits we were building up. We looked at the projects that we may be able to do and determined we still don't have enough money to do a significant undergrounding project. So Laguna Beach was looking to accumulate a bunch to underground theirs along Laguna Beach, Laguna Canyon Road. And we sold for like 55 cents on the dollar our credits to them. And we received $2.4 million that the city council put into roads. So that's going to be primarily funding the Euclid project. So we
Will you, yeah.
Interesting things.
I think you and I both understand that there is a lack of trust that people have with governments at all levels. And as it is very complicated, and when you mention things like Rule 28 funding, I mean, those are the kinds of things that are so inside baseball that it's hard to have the entire public understand kind of all the these government processes. So with that lack of trust, some residents here look at our budget and think that we're wasting money, that we haven't audited what is spent, that if we just cut more, if we just tighten our belts, we have enough money to provide the best services in this county. Can you share some facts around those concerns?
I understand the lack of trust. One of the things that in my 3 years here I've been trying to do is make sure that information is available on our website and other things, and that we're more communicative. Honestly, it was a struggle for me when I was researching the city and the city manager job. The information wasn't on the web. And so I understand the concern that people have on that issue. We do have, we use external auditors on all of our fundings. And I think one of the most important issues going to the sales tax measure on the ballot is it has a dedicated citizens oversight committee for those funds. So there will be an open, transparent citizens oversight committee that reviews the city's utilization of those funds and reports out on it and makes it part of the annual external audit process the city goes through now. But it is,
Look, I've served, so I've personally served on an oversight committee for for school bonds. And so sometimes, so in my experience, that structure is ineffective as far as keeping governments accountable to how they promised the voters they would spend money. So what kind of teeth to this oversight committee, what kind of processes are you going to suggest to the city council that they put into place?
Absolutely. So the process on that is if the sales tax measure is approved prior to April 1st, we would bring to the city council an oversight committee makeup and rules for an ordinance. So what I would suggest is that, they have unfettered access to all the information that is out there.
And I think you're suggesting that they have the ability to make recommendations to the city council ahead of those expenditure approvals.
Absolutely. And that's kind of going into the cycle of how we do, budget, strategic plan, budget adoption. We would fit that oversight committee in there. So they would be doing their review, providing that to the council before the strategic financial planning for prioritization, and then prior to the budget, which would then set those recommendations into play. So what we will do is we will look at how other oversight committees have been put together. But I agree, we have an obligation here to our taxpayers and our residents to put some teeth into it, to make sure that they are certain what they are spending extra is going to what they wanted.
Yeah. So we've gotten some questions on the comment section here about what happened to, quote, all the money that was earmarked for roads. So you've kind of addressed, but maybe you can briefly go over it again, when specifically general funding of roads stopped and where we get our funding now, but also talk about the council policy on spending new revenue.
So yeah, looking back, and again, in preparing for the fiscal update to the council last week, what I did is looked at a lot of our budgets, a lot of the minutes from meetings, and prior again to the end of the 70s, the city council would set their expenditure budget, and we actually had a line item. We would set a property tax amount for roads. So if we knew we needed to do, 3 million of roads, we would set the property tax to cover that amount. That was the one way cities were able to keep up on everything. In the 80s, and it was mostly in the 90s when general fund additional funding was stopped. And that was, excuse me again, because of just additional costs going up. In the early 90s, what you also had was, excuse me for a second. In the early 90s, what you also had is a lot of property tax swaps and even some sales tax takes by the state of California. So the early 90s saw with the state budget woes, the state started taking local government funding. And so at that time, cities had to reprioritize where they were putting things, continue to do services. And it seems at that time, like many cities, that Fullerton stopped the general fund additional money going into streets and roads.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the problem we face with our roads is really decades in the making. So I appreciate you going over that again, and talk about how we audit departments. We just got done with full performance audits of, I believe, Public Works and Community Development. So I think it's, critical for folks to kind of be let in on the fact that we are really assertive in looking at how each department's spending money.
Absolutely. So my personal philosophy on managing a city is we have to be doing it under best practices of what's out there. We have to not be an island. We can't do something because we've always done it that way. So one of the things that I do when I go into a city, I did it in Huntington Beach, did it in Placentia, and doing it here, is have a third party audit a department and do an organizational assessment. Are we, utilizing positions? Are we serving the people that need it? So we've done Public Works, as you said. We've done community development and kind of reformed it into the Community and Economic Development Department. We just finalized an Administrative Services department because now they're overseeing HR. We've completely done information technology, and we are starting to roll that out. Right now, we are just finishing up and have a meeting today on Parks and Rec. And so we're looking at, how we deliver those services in Parks and Recreation better than what we're doing now.
And that's with the Parks Master Plan that you're working on?
That actually is a separate item. So we just kicked out earlier this week a request for proposals for a Parks Master Plan. And what that does is it's going to be a great process because it opens it up to the community, to the park users, to basically look at what our assets are. We have over 50 parks here in Fullerton. We have community centers,
52.
we have trails.
We have 52 parks, and we're going to have 53 as soon as Pearl Park is finished.
Absolutely. And so what a Parks Master Plan does is it sets forth an assessment of all those facilities. And then it goes out to normal residents, to the youth sports groups, to other groups to say, what are your needs? Because, for example, if we have, and I'm just pulling things out of the air, if we have 14 softball fields, but we really only need 8, but we need more soccer fields, this is the process that will identify, hey, we've got to do something different. So you collect all this information, you collect community input, you look at your funding sources, and we use park development fees. So a lot of times we get criticized, why are you putting money into Hillcrest Park and not the roads? It's because the money that goes into Hillcrest Park is from the park development fee, which is generated from development and is absolutely not eligible for roads or even maintenance at parks. So we look at all those factors, and then we can strategically plan out over the next 5 to 10 years how we're going to improve and how we're going to serve the community. So if there's a lot of folks out there that want pickleball and we don't offer pickleball right now, this will be their opportunity to get pickleball at the tennis center or somewhere else.
That sounds fun. A lot of people are playing pickleball these days. I understand.
Yeah, go for it.
With the budget challenges that we've had, the city has put forward various solutions. I know I personally have put forward various solutions, some that have not received any community support, so they haven't moved forward. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? We talked about the sale of surplus property, and that is a positive step that we're taking to increase the funds that we have to deal with our roads. But talk about the other areas.
Yeah, so no.
Or
So
I
there's,
can.
Earlier you talked about, people have asked about why don't we contract out the police department to the sheriff's department? And it's not as simple as that. Could we go from a full service city and contract out police and fire? Garden Grove most recently shed their fire department and joined the Orange County Fire Authority. So the quote that Garden Grove got from the OCFA, when you looked at it, it looked like, oh, hey, Garden Grove's going to save a little bit of money and they may change their service level. They went with it. The problem being is that it's actually costing the city of Garden Grove more because the city is still responsible for the ongoing pensions and the liability from all those workers prior. And that amount makes what they're doing a lot more than what they would have if they continued their service. There are different service delivery models that you could look at in a fire department, and we've done that here. 2 years ago, as part of some budget reductions, we used to have 3 members on a vehicle, an apparatus, and we had an extra apparatus. We had a engine and a truck at Station 1. So we got rid of that engine. We took 6 of the fire. So on the different shifts, you would have 9 firefighters. Through attrition, we got rid of 3 firefighter positions. The other 6, we moved out and became 4 people on a vehicle, which is actually a better service delivery because now they can respond, they can do a medical call, somebody can be in an ambulance. If there's another call, that engine can pull off and still perform service. So there's a lot of different things, but we do look at contracting, the street sweeping, the jail services, which actually is very beneficial to us because we were not meeting the changing state mandates for jails. We were looking at landscaping because the landscape division of Public Works has been, we talk about a 10 or 17% vacancy rate. They were down over 50% of their employees. And so we were not getting to simple landscaping issues. So we looked, could we go ahead and contract out? We were about ready to do that prior to COVID because we found, it would be less money to contract, but it was still above what we would be paying. And with COVID, we just couldn't afford it anymore. So what did we do? We didn't contract. we're still about 50%, and we're doing less. So I drove by Richmond Park the other day, and the grass was probably 8 inches. So, we are going either every other week or maybe every 3 weeks and cutting and mowing lawns at parks and all that stuff. Drove by yesterday, and it is cut. But that's some of the things we've had to do.
I know I had suggested that we sell the Hunt Branch Library site, and that met with great consternation in this community. And this community decided to keep it and to double down on it to try to get services delivered through that site. And I also suggested contracting our library services out to the county, which met with the same consternation. It's the library, the museum closure that we're experiencing now. I've gotten over 500 letters and emails from residents here in Fullerton who love that museum and want it back open. So it is, solutions definitely they are out there. They're hard to come by. They're hard to gain acceptance for, to be sure.
Yeah. Change is difficult.
Yeah.
And some of those decisions are hard, but unfortunately, right now with our fiscal condition, we have to make them. And, being brutally honest, like I was in the council meeting the other day, if we don't get that extra revenue source, if the voters don't pass Measure S, there's going to be a lot of tougher decisions that I'll be bringing to the next city council for them to make. But, I want everybody to know that all of those recommendations are going to be to make sure that the city can maintain and continue versus facing maybe, we don't ever want to go through a bankruptcy proceeding. We don't want to declare a fiscal emergency. We want to make sure that our employees are here because they do an awesome job all around. But it is, we have some serious choices coming up, and we may have to revisit the issue of the libraries. We're looking at, can we, RFP our community centers, not to sell them or dispose of them, but to get an outside group to deliver the services that maybe we're doing now, but somebody else could do much better. Is that our primary core responsibility to deliver services out of a community center, or can a nonprofit group do it? And our partnership with them is providing them the facility. So those are all the things that we are going to be looking at and bringing back to the council for decisions.
Talk a little bit too about economic development and our focus, especially now with our new business assistance team and the redevelopment of the Kimberly Clark property.
Absolutely. So economic development is the long run. So it's not something I always tell people, you can't call up Starbucks and say, hey, we have a corner, and by next Monday, Starbucks is in that corner. So that's one reason why the council approved the plan to change community development to community and economic development, because planners and those people who are helping businesses locate here should be that first line and should have the thought process that we want you to be here and we want to make it easy for you to be here, and complying with all the state regulations and all that stuff that we have to enforce. So that mentality is up there as to how can we get you from application to certificate of occupancy for your new business. But meanwhile, also, when redevelopment went away, when the state took that away, we never had any money for any type of economic development study, any dedicated economic development staff. And so we need to get back to that point where we can do studies. So looking at the Harbor and Orangethorpe area, that's our regional mall, for lack of better terms. But it's really disjointed. You drive through, you go to, Chick-fil-A or to Jersey Mike's, and even the interior circulation is just like it's Frankenstein. So one of the things we want to do is work with the property owners, put together an economic development plan for all those four corners as to what can we do. And the changing nature of the economy. There is more online access. There is more need for residential in such an area to support the commercial. Bella Terra in Huntington Beach, which is right off the 405 and Beach, is an excellent example. It used to be the old Huntington Beach Mall, and now it's the Bella Terra, but it has several hundred residential units. It's a vibrant, great restaurant place, and it makes sense. So things change. We have to go ahead and change. And then also we have to abide by those changes and those mandates that the state is throwing down on us. And that's a serious concern.
Mm-hmm. So in areas like you mentioned at Harbor and Orangethorpe, in an infill project with more housing there might be a great stimulus to that. We just built the Harbor, I think it's called Harbor Lofts, right next to Costco, trying to drive more business, walkable communities, those kinds of things. And so that will help drive our economy. We're also in negotiations to permit the building of a boutique hotel at our train station,
Yes.
which will be a good economic driver. We also are working on plans to start a business improvement district in our downtown. We had a paid parking pilot program in our downtown before COVID hit, to try to manage our parking better in the downtown. So thanks for sharing that, because I understand, the anger that can be out there. I pay my taxes. Why aren't you doing this? And so I want people to really understand, the steps that the city has taken. And in regards to that question, Ken, just talk about that specific comment. I pay my taxes. Why can't you do this? What taxes do we get? And how much of them do we get to run our city?
So the primary taxes that the city gets is property tax and sales tax. Property tax, again, for whatever somebody pays, we get 15.6% of it. And again, you could be living, if you've been owning your home for more than 25 years or so, and somebody moves in next door to you, they will probably be paying 10 times the amount of property taxes that you do. So there are some people, there's a house on West Street that's up for sale, and the house next to it has been there for a long time. The amount of property tax that the city gets from the older house, they're both the same, but the one that's been lived in for longer is $99 a year. Next door to it, we get about $999 a year. So those are some discrepancies there. From sales tax, which we get about $22 million a year in sales tax. Orange, which is similar size population, similar geographic, they get over $44 million a year because they have more retail, more commercial land use, more new vehicle dealerships and all that stuff. We do not have a utility users tax. A lot of cities have that. We don't have any other right now add-on taxes or anything. We have, lesser hotels, so we get about $3 million in transit occupancy tax, the bed tax. Anaheim gets $185 million in TOT tax. So those are some of the different taxes. And again, of all the sales tax currently that is generated by Fullerton residents or visitors to Fullerton, we only get 13% of that overall amount. So that's if you take the 1%, divide it by the 7.75, we get 13%. The rest of it goes to the county, about 36%, and then over 50% goes to the state. So.
Okay, thanks for that. We got a question about why for our city employees we don't adopt a 401k plan for all of them.
We have been under contract to the California Public Employees Retirement System since 1946. And once you are under contract, you're always under contract, which is the unfortunate thing. In fact, there's a bill right now on the governor's desk that has been pushed by some of the public sector unions that would even make it harder for a city to carve out exemptions, much like Placentia did on their new fire department, where they're not part of CalPERS. That ability will go away if this bill is signed by the governor's office. But the reality
so
is
just to
that
stop right there for just a second. So Placentia was able to start a new fire department and give them a defined contribution retirement plan because a fire department never existed for them before there. Is that right?
they had a fire department up until 1974. And then, but yes, that's right. Because there was a exemption in California Public Employment Relations law that allowed a city to carve out certain classifications, carve out firefighters. They were able to carve out firefighters, have them in a 401k style. But it actually was the Orange County Professional Firefighters Union, OCFA union, that pushed this bill that is getting rid of that ability of cities. So they're restricting us more in the future. We would not be able to do that in the future. The other big issue is that, we're an older city. We have twice as many retirees as we do active employees. And the way PERS does their entire system, where they have an assumed rate of return of 7%. So anytime they don't meet 7%, like last year and the year before, our costs go up because we have to make up that lost rate. If we were to choose to get out, say the council said, absolutely terminate the contract with PERS. What PERS is going to do is take that unfunded liability that we owe all of those retirees, assume that nothing more is going to be paid into it, and then assume that instead of a 7%, it actually is going to be at a blended rate of the 10 and 20-year treasury rate, which right now is about 0.65. That's the rate of return. So your unfunded liability, if it was a manageable, 300 million, is going to balloon to over 1.6 billion for that. So it's not a poison pill. It is a shackle and a hatchet that we cannot get out of the PERS system. Something has to change, but we can't do it individually. So the 2012 PEPRA, the Public Employees Pension Reform Act, was great, didn't go far enough. We need another one that is done at the state level because there's 480 plus cities. An average amount of 4 bargaining units per. One of the things the city council did even before 2012 is they identified the pension issue. They made a second tier for public safety. So instead of that 3 at 50, it's a 3 at 55. Well, Anaheim, Huntington Beach, Orange, Irvine did not do that. So we're at a disadvantage in recruitment and retention because we can't get a lateral who's going to come over here at a 3 at 55 when they can stay somewhere else and keep their 3 at 50 and get more money. So that's why it has to be done at a state level. We can advocate, but it is near impossible to make changes to CalPERS and to our ability singularly as a city.
And even so, over the time, at least that I've been on city council, we have prioritized and succeeded in getting employees to pay more of their pension costs, and I am proud of that. And also, you mentioned PEPRA, the reforms to pensions that the state passed some years ago. In 15 years, that is going to help us, correct?
Correct, yeah. And because of our higher turnover rate, we actually are exceeding what we thought we would be with the amount of PEPRA employees versus what's called a classic. And then, yes, we have done things where employees pay more. Fire Association is moving up to a 12%. Police right now are at 9%. Our executive team is paying a little bit more. I'm paying actually, I think it's 13% towards my pension. And so there are things that we are doing in the next round of negotiations. we're going to emphasize that much more because that's what's needed. So.
As we come to the end of our time, are there any closing comments that you want to make?
I just believe that if there's information people want, send an email to citymanager@cityofFullerton.com. Check out our website. Look at the presentation material that we put up there from last week's presentation to City Council about our financial situation. We do have additional information up there on Measure S and what it means for the city. I just appreciate everybody's input and comments. It's a wonderful community. We have so much potential. And that is the goal, is to make sure that we have the ability to meet the residents' expectations of service delivery, to fix our streets. I believe in the broken window theory, and we need to fix our streets. We just don't have the money right now. And I look forward to having the money and to moving as quickly as possible so that people know we are expending their money the way it should be.
Thanks so much, Ken. As always, it's great to talk with you. I always learn new things when you and I spend time together. And thank you for your service and your leadership to the city of Fullerton. And I'm confident that you're joined by a city council that loves this city and wants to make sure that we leave it better than we found it for our children and children's children. Today on our town hall, we've been talking about city finances, the history of our financial situation, how we got to where we are today, and the proactive measures that this city council and city staff are taking to address the inadequacies that there are. There were some specific questions that we didn't get to today related to specifically road repair and pensions. And I encourage you to go through the city's Facebook page, because we've done a series of town halls and will continue to dive in deeply to those issues and many more. So your questions about why our roads stink are really going to be answered in detail on the town hall that that we did with our city engineer. And then your question about, why can't we just all move to a 401k for our public employees is answered in detail on our town hall about pensions that Mr. Domer and I did. I want to thank you for joining us today, and I want to encourage you again to mask up and be safe and support your local businesses as you have the opportunity. Thanks so much. I wish you peace and health until we meet again. Bye-bye.